and I have been thinking, maybe it's time we move into one of these retirement villages, you know, where there's swimming pool, golf, tennis. And last year we were in Florida and we toured one of these, and there was an incident at one of them. A woman goes into the lounge where a lot of the men were hanging out, watching TV, playing cards, and she makes an announcement. She says, if anybody here can guess what's in my hand, I'll have sex with you tonight. And a few seconds go by and the elderly gentleman in the back yells out, I think it's an elephant. And she says, close enough. So I have a good friend at home who recently was having a lot of legal problems. And he knew I knew a lot of attorneys in town. So I gave him a referral to this firm. It's called Schwartz, and Schwartz. So he calls the firm up and he says, could I speak to Attorney Schwartz? And I said, well, he's in court today. And then he says, well, could I speak to Attorney Schwartz? And he says, well, he's speaking to a client right now. Well, then could I speak to Attorney Schwartz? Well, he's out ill today. Well, then could I speak to Attorney Schwartz? He's speaking. So when I was home a few months ago, I was walking down the street and I bumped into a friend of mine who I knew was having some problems, and I said to him, you know, I'm sorry to hear about the fire in your warehouse. And he said, shh, it's tomorrow. So there's three fellas. They're out hiking, but they got lost. And there was a Frenchman, an Irishman, and a Jewish fellow. And in the distance, finally they see a tavern. And the Irishman, he's a little ahead of the other two, and he can barely make it up to the saloon, and he finally gets up to the bar and he tells the bartender, you know, I'm just so tired and thirsty, I've been out there, I need a big glass of beer. So he pours him a nice beer. And then the Frenchman just comes in and he's also can barely make it to the bar, he's exhausted, and he tells the bartender, I'm just tired and thirsty, I'd like a big glass of wine. So he pours him a glass of wine. And then the Jewish fellow comes in, again, he can barely walk, and he comes up to the bar and he tells the bartender, I'm just so tired and thirsty, I think I'm diabetic. See, that's a Jewish joke. I don't know. If I have to explain it, it's not funny. But so there's a fella who recently had some surgery. He's in the hospital, he's recovering. And a nun who comes along and sees if the patients need any help or trying to cheer them up, she ends up talking to this fella, and she wants to know a little bit about him. And he says, well, I'm married, I have a lovely wife, I have 10 children. And the nun says, oh, that's wonderful, wonderful Catholic family, God must be very proud of you. And he says, no, excuse me, sister, I'm not Catholic, I'm Jewish. And then all of a sudden she gets up in a huff and she walks out and he says, you know, what's wrong? And she says, well, I don't want to talk to a sex maniac. So another story. This woman is about to go into labor, and she enters the hospital with her husband and talks to the doctor. And before she's going into labor, he tells her about a new device that they invented recently, which will take the pain of childbirth from the woman to the father of the child. Brand new device, and would you like to do it? And so the couple talk it over, and they decide to go ahead with it. So, you know, the doctor's ready, and so he turns the machine on to about 10% of the pain, and he asks the father, you know, are you okay, any pain? He says, no, I'm fine. And then the doctor turns it up to about 25% of the pain. And again, the doctor asks, how do you feel? He says, no, I'm fine, no problem. And then he decides to turn it up to 50% pain. And again, the father, no, I'm fine, nothing. And then the doctor finally turns up to 100% of the pain. And again, nothing, I'm fine. And the baby's born, the baby's healthy and happy, everybody's happy. But the only problem is when they went home, they found the mailman on the porch dead. So there's a couple, older couple, and the woman's been feeling well lately. You know, she has no energy, and her husband says, well, why don't you go see your doctor and have a checkup? So they go see her doctor, she has a checkup, and she tells the doctor, you know, I'm always tired, I have no energy. When Max comes home, I have no energy to make him dinner. So the doctor gives her an exam, and after the exam, there's nothing wrong with her. You know, like, you seem to be fine. Would you mind if I ask you, how's your sex life? And she says, not good. I think Max forgot how. And then the doctor says, you know, I think what might help, I think if you have sex maybe 3 times a week, like on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, how does that sound? And she says, oh, that sounds wonderful. And then he asks her husband, you know, what do you think about that? And he says, well, Mondays and Wednesdays I can drive her, but Friday she has to take the bus. They're all true. So there's a couple, an older couple, they're laying in bed, and all of a sudden the husband puts his arm around her, and he's rubbing her neck and her shoulders, and he's feeling around there, and then he touches her lower back, and on each side of the back, and then he's rubbing her outside of one of her legs and the inside and feeling around there. And then, you know, she thinks he's getting a little frisky, and all of a sudden, nothing. You know, he doesn't say anything, and she says to him, you know, honey, are you okay? And he says, yes, I'm fine. I found the remote. So there's 2 fellas every Saturday morning walking dogs, and they always walk by the synagogue. And one of them says, you know, I understand they have a wonderful buffet on Saturdays after the service. Wonderful brunch with all types of food. And why don't we go in there? And one says, well, how can we go in? We have dogs. He says, no, don't worry, we can do this. So one fella goes in with his dog, and one of the workers says, well, you can't come in, you know, bring the dog in. And he says, well, this is my service dog. So he lets him in. So a few moments later, the other fellow comes in, same thing. He says, well, you can't come in with the dog. And the fellow says, well, this is my seeing eye dog. And the worker says, you mean a Chihuahua? And the guy said, is that what they gave me? So, recently in San Miguel, I've noticed there's a lot of dating older men with younger women, much older men. And this couple went out for dinner, and when they were done, they were walking back to her apartment. She lives on the 3rd floor, and she says to the fellow she was out with, would you like to go upstairs and have sex? And he says, well, I can only do one or the other. So, there's a young man who's been studying acting for years in New York, and he finally got a part in a major play, and he's going to be playing a Jewish husband. And he still lives at home, and comes home and he tells his mother, you know, I got this part, I'm going to be playing a Jewish husband, and she's thrilled, you know, oh, I'm so proud of you. And then a few moments later, his dad comes in, and he tells him, you know, I got this part, in a major play, I'm going to be playing a Jewish husband. And the father says, well, I was hoping you'd have a speaking part. this situation, maybe I mentioned it in the past, but I have an elderly cousin who lives in Miami, and he was walking down the street and he sees a big sign, it says a sperm bank, and he feels he's going to go in there and donate to the sperm bank, and the nurse asks him, do you mind if I ask how old you are? No, I'm 90. And she says, are you sure you want to do this? He said, no, I want to do it. So she gives him a little jar and a few magazines, and he goes into one of the little rooms. And a few minutes later, one of the doctors is walking by, and he hears a lot of moaning and groaning. And he says, Mr. Shields, are you okay? And he says, no, I can't open the jar. One more. So there's a young man who goes to the synagogue every Friday night, and the rabbi looks out and he sees this fellow and he looks really sad and depressed. He's got his head in his hands, and when the service is over, he goes up to him and he says, what's wrong? You look so sad and depressed. And he says, well, Rabbi, I'm 30 years old and not married. Every time I bring a woman home to see my mother, she never likes them. So the rabbi, who's very wise, says, I think you know what you could do. Why don't you try to find a woman who looks like your mother, dresses like her, talks like your mother. Yeah, I think that would help. So the young man, thank you, Rabbi. So a month or two go by, and it's another Friday night, and the rabbi looks out on the congregation and he sees this fellow, young man, and he looks worse than he did, a month ago. And when the service is over, he comes up to him and says, well, what's wrong? You look terrible. Well, Rabbi, I did everything you told me to do. I found a young woman who looked like my mother, talked like her, dressed like her. She didn't cook like my mother. And the rabbi said, well, what was the problem? Well, my father didn't like her.